Hello class, this is Mr. Biddle and welcome to another digital input. Today we're going to be talking about Mohenjo-daro, one of ancient India's first settlements. First we're going to begin by talking about the geography of India and how the geography played a role in the development of the first settlements in India. Then we're going to get specific and talk about some of the artifacts historians and archaeologists have uncovered near and actually in Mohenjo-daro. And then finally, we're going to talk about how these artifacts help historians really understand the way daily life was like thousands of years ago in ancient India. So let's begin with the geography. So we're going to begin by talking about the Indus River. Now, the Indus River is located actually in present-day Pakistan. It begins in the Himalayas mountain range in the north, which we talked about when we learned about China, and it flows south. It gets water from the melting snow and other mountain ranges nearby. The melting snow and ice from the mountain ranges keep the river water level quite high. Eventually the river flows through what is now the country of Pakistan and then empties out into the Arabian Sea. In addition, the Indus River Valley contains some of the best farmland in the world. Like the Ganges, the Indus carries sediment from the mountains to the plains, and that sediment then leaves the surrounding soil rich and fertile for farming. The Indus River has often been compared to Egypt's Nile River. Like the Nile, the Indus is an important source of water for the farmland that lies along its banks. Let's talk about the Ganges River. Now, many of you have probably heard about the Ganges River. It's one of India's most sacred rivers. It's also one of India's most polluted rivers. The river traces its way south from the Himalayas like the Indus River. However, instead of going south into the Arabian Sea, it actually goes south and empties out into the Bay of Bengal. Now, like the Indus, it carries with it very, very rich nutrient soil, which helps farmers farm. And during the rainy season, the river can actually flood and destroy crops along its banks. Let's talk about the Himalayan mountain range. So the Himalayas are located along India's northern border. They are the highest mountain range in the world. Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain, is of course part of the Himalayas. It reaches actually about 5 miles into the sky, if you can imagine that. The mountains form a natural border between India and the subcontinent of the rest of Asia. The Himalayas live up to their name, which actually means, translated, home of the snows. The highest peaks are always covered in snow and ice, as you see pictured here. The water from the range's glaciers feed the northern India's major rivers, namely the Indus and the Ganges. Underneath the Himalayan mountains, the earth is always moving. This movement causes Mount Everest to rise slightly every single year. It also makes earthquakes and landslides quite common in this area. We're going to talk about the Deccan Plateau, which is south of the Himalayas. A plateau is defined as basically an elevated or raised area of land that is flatter than a mountain. The Deccan Plateau has different kinds of land. In the flatter parts, large granite rocks formed by volcanoes cover the land. These rocks are among the world's oldest, dating back some 600 million years ago. The hillier parts, as you see pictured here, of the plateau have thin forest and low scrubby bushes. The plateau is fairly dry, and there are a few rivers, but the monsoon rains are primarily responsible for the moisture in this area. The soil on the plateau is black, yellow, or red. The black soil is rich in iron and good for growing cotton. So let's talk about the massive Thar Desert in the northwestern portion of India. Now, the landscape is littered with rocks, although you can't really see it pictured here. There's very little plant life in the Thar Desert except for a few strands of grass, some low, hardy shrubs. Most of the time the heat is just absolutely unbearable. Water is precious, of course, because it's a desert. There is evidence of dried up riverbeds near the desert's borders, but there are no real rivers now. At one point, the Sarasvati River flowed alongside the Thar Desert. However, the Sarasvati River has since dried up. Also, there's a variety of animals and birds that make their home in this desert. Some include, of course, lizards and snakes. Others include gazelles, quail, duck, even geese. So, as we talked about previously with China, geography does play a major role in India and the development of India. But it's most important to note that the first civilizations really began west of the Thar Desert and along the Indus Valley. In the Indus Valley, there was a very important river that flowed, like we talked about earlier, and that was the Indus River. And it is here that the first permanent settlements of India began to develop. So let's talk about one of the first settlements, the settlement of Mohenjo-daro. As previously said, Mohenjo-daro was located in the Indus River Valley in northwestern India, which is actually present-day Pakistan. We think the civilization of Mohenjo-daro began around 2700 BCE and really kind of faded around 1900 BC. That means the civilization lasted about 800 years. Now, many other towns also were clustered near Mohenjo-daro and placed along this Sarasvati River, which we talked a little bit about. These settlements became known as the Indus-Sarasvati civilization. Now, Mohenjo-daro actually means place or hill of the dead. Archaeologists found its ruins in 1922. Carefully, they excavated and dug up the ruins, and they discovered many, many artifacts, which we'll be talking about right now. Actually, let's start by talking about the citadel. The citadel was a raised area or fort. Now, the citadel was surrounded by walls. In times of trouble, people would gather here in this area, and this would be, of course, a way to protect the people of Mohenjo-daro. So let's get specific here and talk about some of the smaller artifacts that historians have discovered and what that really helps to tell us about the people of Mohenjo-daro. Now, in the lower city, archaeologists found all sorts of artifacts. Here you see a stone statue that's about 7 inches high, and it shows how men in Mohenjo-daro might have looked and dressed. The figure here has a short, tidy beard and a clean upper lip. His hair is tied with a band, which means he probably grew it fairly long, and he's wearing a patterned robe draped over his left shoulder. He has a very calm and noble expression. Now, archaeologists are not sure what the statue represents, although some have inferred that this could be a priest or some sort of king. Another thing they found in Mohenjo-daro were these amazing stone seals. Now, these look quite large, but they were actually fairly small, about the size, a little bit larger than a postage stamp. So these small stone seals pictured here are among some of the most mysterious artifacts discovered in Mohenjo-daro. They were actually found in large numbers throughout the entire ruins. These seals are carved with pictographs, pictures used to stand for objects, sounds, or ideas. Historians uncovered roughly 400 of them, but they're still not quite sure what these pictographs mean. They have yet to decipher them. Many seals show animals such as buffalo, bulls, tigers, elephants, rhinoceros, fish, and crocodiles. No one really knows how these seals were used, but scientists have made some educated guesses. Many of these seals have a small loop on the back. Perhaps people wore them as charms to keep away evil. Another thing that they discovered in Mohenjo-daro were these weights and scales. Several stone weights and a scale were found actually near this large building. When archaeologists searched the ruins of this building, they also found bits of grain such as barley and wheat. Historians decided, that this building could have clearly been a granary of sorts. The scale and weights found near the granary are interesting clues. They suggest that the ancient people of Mohenjo-daro might have used grain as a form of currency. They may have also weighed grain and used different amounts to trade for various goods. Farmers also had their own granaries outside the city as well, so perhaps the grain in the citadel granary was collected as a form of taxes, which wouldn't be that far-fetched because most civilizations we've studied about so far would collect grain as a form of taxes. Finally, let's talk about some toys and games. Archaeologists have uncovered dice, stone balls, grooved clay tracks, and even stone game boards. The game of chess was probably invented in India. An ancient Indian book describes a war game played with dice and pieces called pawns. Now, although modern chess is not played with dice today, historians believe this war game was an early form of chess. The small carved game pieces found at Mohenjo-daro may have been used to play this game in some form. Now, the children of Mohenjo-daro probably played simpler games. Some of the objects found by archaeologists seem to be children's toys. For example, they found clay chariots, even little mazes that they could roll balls around, as you see pictured here. So what can we glean from all those previous artifacts? Well, the first thing that we could take away from the evidence that we just discussed was that the people of Mohenjo-daro had a very sophisticated infrastructure. Now, what that really means is they planned their city quite well. If we were to take a helicopter view of Mohenjo-daro, it would have looked like a matrix of sorts, where the roads went north, south, east, and west. And by planning a city like that, it actually helps people move to and from quite easily. And actually, the Romans would also adopt this style as well. And today, to this very day, we still have this style of city planning. Another important aspect that we didn't discuss that I want to point out now is that the people of Mohenjo-daro created a sewage system that was very, very, very sophisticated. Pictured here is an actual sewer. This took place over nearly 5,000 years ago. Mohenjo-daro's complex system of drains, pipes, wells, and bathrooms really set the city apart from other settlements at the time. Now, 2,000 years would actually pass after this before the world would see another system as sophisticated as the one we see in Mohenjo-daro. A network of clay pipes connected Mohenjo-daro's buildings and homes to the main sewer system. Dirty used water, wastewater, would actually flow in channels along the streets, and it would actually flow out of the city. This would actually help to make the city smell better. It would also cut down on flies and other insects, and it would also help the longevity and the health of its citizens. Trash and waste, these things have germs, and of course people could easily have gotten sick and even died from some of the diseases that those things carried. So by creating a sewage system that kind of funneled the garbage out of the city, it kept the inhabitants of the city very healthy. So yes, the infrastructure was quite sophisticated, and by having a sophisticated infrastructure like this, it would have made daily life pretty good. Another thing that we can glean from the evidence is that they probably had a form of standardized language. Even though we haven't found a Rosetta Stone for the language that would help us to decipher this, we could still pretty much infer that they had some sort of standardized language. We could also glean that they had a standardized form of currency. The weights and measures were very precise, and so by creating a standard form of currency, it would help trade go much more smoothly. As we talked about with China, we know that standardization is definitely an important aspect of civilization, and it really helps the people within that civilization. So the last aspect that I want to mention is the idea of class system. We think that most of the people of Mohenjo-daro, at least the wealthy people, lived in the northern upper regions of the city near the citadel, and the poor people probably lived in the south. We know this because the larger homes had up to 12 bedrooms, whereas the smaller homes were pretty much stacked on top of each other and quite small. So this class system would have given everybody clear roles, and as we learned earlier when we talked about the first civilizations, especially ones in the Near East, specialization of labor is a key indicator for the first civilizations. And we think that the people of Mohenjo-daro did have a specialized labor force, and they had a clear class system of upper class, middle class, and lower class. And we think this based on the fact that the city was laid out in a certain way where the poor people were sort of near the edges, and the wealthier people were closer to the citadel, closer to the city center, where they could be safer. So there you have it, you guys. Today we talked about the geography of India, and we talked about some of the important rivers, the important mountain ranges, and we even talked about the Deccan Plateau as well. Then we talked about some of the artifacts that were discovered in Mohenjo-daro, and how those artifacts really helped to paint a picture of what life would have been like in the ancient city itself. So thanks for watching. This is Mr. Biddle, and until next time, thanks guys. Bye.